Hello, guys. Today, I'm so freaking excited. This is actually the second recording that we did. We recorded an episode earlier, and now we're recording an interview to Rishi. And I made a confession to Rishi earlier that for once, I was more excited about interviewing him, so not really episodes related conversation, than actually recording the episode, because we're going to be talking about something that completely blew my mind the first time that I discovered it. And I want to tell you a little bit about how I discovered it. So I've been on Rishi's email newsletter for years. I discovered Rishi, in 2000, and I think it was 2010, the first time I discovered
Yeah, I
you.
agree.
And I think it was like a year and a half ago or something. I always probably, if Rishi looks at his MailChimp account and looks at my name, he probably sees the open rate, one of the highest open rates to his newsletters. But he sent this newsletter a year and a half ago about this article where he was explaining this brand new CRO methodology that he completely invented from scratch. And I still remember the dopamine hit that I had while going through that article. And right after it, I literally pinged him. I don't know if you remember that, but I pinged him and I was like, dude, we need to talk about this because nobody's doing it. And I need to like drill you down on a bunch of stuff, right? So that's why I was like, Rishi, we need to have an entire chat, an entire conversation about this new methodology. And the name of the methodology, you want to tell them about the name of the
Sure.
methodology?
Yeah. It's called active participation.
Active participation. So do you want to explain people what, like in super simple words, what active participation is?
Yeah. So I'm excited. I'm really excited to talk to you about this. And I should just qualify that I have talked about active participation to hundreds and hundreds of people, and nobody really thought it was interesting. And Lorenzo was the first person. And actually, I didn't believe in it. He believes in it more than I do. And so it's really amazing that he just immediately zeroed in on it and said, wait a minute, there's something here. But the genesis of the idea, like all ideas that come from my head, are based on me trying to steal something that already exists. And the way I kind of thought about it was that when you walk into a retail store and you meet, and I would talk to my clients, and my clients would go to trade shows and go for these events, and they would talk about these rich conversations they were having with potential buyers. And this happened actually, the first insight came in 2008, and I was like, why isn't this enthusiasm reflected on our, and expertise reflected on our product page? And and I realized that we need some mechanism to take the personalization that happens, that salespeople have perfected over hundreds of years, to somehow bring it to e-commerce, to bring it to the web. And one of the principal problems with e-commerce is super efficient, but one of the principal problems with e-commerce is that when you go to a product page, whether Lorenzo goes to that product page, or I go to that product page, or someone else goes to that product page on their mobile device, or they go on a weekend, or they go in the afternoon, wherever they go, they're all shown the exact same description, which implies that the marketer knows the perfect pitch to show to all consumers, which I would say is mathematically impossible. And so that was like, I was like, okay, we have this problem on product pages, and then in the in the real world, this is not even a problem because we already solved it. How can we reconcile this? And I kind of worked on it, and I thought about it, and that's kind of how the concept came about.
Now, before we talk a little bit more about active participation, you said that you kind of took inspiration from the offline world. Can you talk about what exactly about the offline world you took inspiration from? And maybe even if you like, if you want to give us like an example of that specific thing about the offline world, that would be super fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, it's very interesting. It's kind of like it's kind of goes back to this whole thing of artificial intelligence. Scientists are trying to make software that is artificially intelligent, and what they're realizing is that things that a 4-year-old child just intuitively understands, you actually have to hard code it into software. And I think that's the same kind of analogy. So this is something that no no company in the world would ever have to explain to their sales if they hired someone in sales. It is something we just naturally do as human beings. But it's not natural when it comes to e-commerce. When you walk into a retail store, if I'm walking into a retail store where I am trying to buy I'm trying to buy I like to use the juicer example. I want to buy a juicer, I want to lose weight. The salesperson, whoever I'm interacting with, would just engage me in a conversation and would be like, "Hey, Lorenzo, what brings you in today?" And in that conversation, I would give a response. That response would lead to a follow-up question. But what the salesperson is doing in subconsciously, by the way, this is not conscious, subconsciously, is he's paying attention to how relaxed is Lorenzo when he's having this conversation. Is he feeling some anxiety? Does it seem like he's in a rush? And the salesperson would naturally ask questions like, what brought you into the store today? And if Lorenzo were to say that my wife is shopping in the store, in the Ulta cosmetic store next door, I'm just walking in, that's a totally different bucket versus I live 12 miles away and I came here because I'm trying to buy a juicer. And so subconsciously the salesperson is collecting this information and kind of like categorizing. He or she would try to figure out like what other alternatives they're considering. They would try to figure out like what goals they're trying to achieve. They would try to figure out what their price sensitivity is, because I have like 17 models in my store, and there's one Cadillac version which I will sell to someone who says price is not an object. And then I also have this value item where I will sell to someone who says I only want the basic functionality, but I want it to work well. So all of these things are just happening naturally. There is no script for it. It just happens naturally. So my thought was, what if we could reverse engineer this process and apply it to the product page? That's the example I can think of.
Yeah, and by the way, one thing I want to add is that obviously, the offline retail world is a classic example of this, right? But this sort of like, let's call it game, right, between the seller and the buyer also happens, for example, on enterprise software, right? You're the salesperson, you're just gonna ask a bunch of questions to the prospect, and then you tailor your pitch based on that. And I don't want to reveal too much about that before we continue talking about active participation. So it's something that I wanted to specify. Now, the second thing that kind of triggering in my brain when I first saw active participation, the first one, my mind was completely blown away. The second thing was like, oh my God, like I literally spent like, a few minutes thinking. But the second thing was, oh my God, this can be applied to so many different scenarios and so many industries, so many different, not just e-com, right? And so now, Rishi, the question I have is like, what do you think are the most powerful use cases of the use of active participation? And, can you give us some examples? And I know you prepared them. Can you give us some examples of how companies could be leveraging active participation in different ways?
So actually, I want to mention two things over here, which I think are very related and important topics to discuss. So in terms of the application, of course, I think it applies to a whole bunch of industries, like you rightly pointed out. But there is a big difference. I just want to make people aware of the fact that the difference between active participation and the classic definition of personalization is that personalization is the we're using software cues to personalize content. So like if it's a classic example is like a vending machine for Coke, where the temperature is super hot outside, they would actually increase the prices. So they're kind of using external cues to kind of affect the prices. Active participation is completely user driven. So we don't have to rely on any of those signals for like, oh, they're coming from Facebook or they're using Safari browser, they're less price sensitive, any of that stuff, because I think that's very complicated. So that's one thing I should mention. The other thing is people might be thinking like, Rishi, what you're describing is no different than a product wizard. And it's actually quite different. So the way the product wizard works is that you're on a website or you're on a product page and there's a little nudge that appears that says, we'll help you find the perfect product. The problem with this is twofold. Number one is that a great analogy to think about is, imagine walking into a retail store and the salesperson comes up to you and says, what are you looking for? And you say, I'm looking for a blender. You say, great, I'm going to first ask you 10 questions. And then I'm going to make you it's just not how humans behave. So even though on the nuts and bolts level, the wizard does exactly that, it is not organic. It feels weird. The other problem is that consumers know what a wizard does. There is no wizard in the history of mankind that does not recommend a product at the end of it, right? So I already know that these questions are going to lead to a very specific recommendation, which might not, which active participation is not designed on. It's active participation is focused on me personalizing the sales pitch for you versus making a recommendation.
Yeah, so this is actually a very good differentiation. So the way I think about the classic wizard, let's call it also quiz, because I think a lot of people, are more familiar with the concept of like using a quiz on a product on a website to get direct recommendations. So the purposes of the quiz, the classic quiz, is product discovery. Okay. I put a bunch of inputs and the computer gives me a bunch of product recommendations, right? Active participation's goal is completely different. Like the application is similar, but 10x better than the classic quiz.
Awesome. Yeah. So you want me to share some examples, right?
Yes, please.
Right.
I'm excited about this.
I'm going to share, let me just, let's get to this just a second.
By the way, I want to say that if the most famous and successful copywriters in the old school direct response marketing world were still alive, right? And saw this active participation methodology, they would be like, oh my God, this is like unconsciously what we've been wanting to do for forever, right? Like it's like it would be like a super dream for them.
Well, I hope that I do think it's powerful, and I hope that people see value in it. But let me share some examples now, since this is show and not tell, right? So I'm just going to resize my screen a little bit. This is a little smaller and make us a little bigger. So there are many applications of active participation. But one of the three examples I'm going to talk about today, one of the challenges that you run into, especially with technical products, is that there are lots of use cases. So for example, over here, we're looking at these pair of running shoes that are made of merino wool. And actually, this is a client site that I worked on. And the challenge we ran into was that it is eco-friendly, it is better performance, but also the people who are using it are probably using merino runners for the very first time. So they're actually switching from, let's say, a Nike running shoe to this. And so the problem became that what should I be emphasizing on the product page? And because some people might care about the fact that it is water resistant, but some people might be concerned about the fact that it's itchy. So what we did was, this is an important part of active participation. You don't want to show the prompt for the options right the moment you want to first pull the user in as though they can manage it themselves. And so at the top of the page, we had our elevator sales pitch. And then right after the first or second paragraph, we said, there is a lot that needs to be said about these runners. Please select the topics that interest you the most. And now people will look at this and say, okay, I care about sustainability. Okay, I care about odor. Oh, I don't care about the fact that it's natural. Some people would just click on this button over here, show all shown above. And what happens is, it's really simple, but when you click on this, we actually show a button that says, reveal content. When you click on it, we actually show you all the content at the bottom that is perfectly synchronized with the selections you made over here. So this helps in two ways. Number one is we've actually reduced the effective word count on the page because we are only showing the content you care about. But it's so much more effective for the buyer because now it's completely personalized. By the way, there's another psychological trick that's happening, which is that when you go to a restaurant and you say, I want a certain item, then you have to have that, like you have already kind of accepted that's what you care about. So they now had the readability, the reading percentage should go up because you've already said, I care about the fact it's 100% natural, right? So.
Yeah, so there's two things I want to say about this. First of all, one of the biggest sin when it comes to like one-to-one selling, like the classic, offline or, software, any sort of like selling is selling a selling point that the user doesn't care about, right? Like instead of, that's why the whole concept of asking questions in the selling process is so powerful, because when you ask questions, you uncover what the user really cares, what the other person, what the prospect really cares about. So then you can tailor your pitch based on, okay, here's what we discovered. The person cares during the discovery process. Now I'm going to tailor the pitch. If I'm a good salesperson, I'm going to tailor the pitch just around what you just told me that you care about. The other thing that I want to point out, which is actually an idea on the top of what you just showed us, if you want to actually share it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing that could be interesting testing here, Rishi, is adding a question that says something like, oh, is there anything else that is missing around this category? And then you can start actually collecting information about a product attribute that might, a lot of people might be caring about that you might have missed.
Lorenzo and I always play ping pong. That's a really good idea. This is not at all scripted. And one of the reasons why, and I think this is a really important thing also, is that I want the listeners to just focus on the first principles of this idea. Don't think about like, okay, how do I apply this? I'm not selling running shoes. This isn't applied. That's not the idea. That's why we're not actually showing live examples. We just want you to understand the principle of allowing the user to select the content they care about and showing them that content. That's the idea. That's it. That's all active participation is doing. You can do with it what you want, but that's the principle. Yeah,
it's like, you tell me, you Rishi user, you tell me what you care about in your decision-making process when it comes to product X. And I tell you, right? And I tell you the reason why you should buy the product. That's the whole concept, right?
Yeah, and actually we didn't even cover, we're not going to cover this in this episode, but actually the active participation, it's a two-way punch, right? So the other thing you do is when you select, for example, 100% natural, right? So when you do, when you get the button only appears conditionally because we want to make people make selections first. But at the bottom of that block of content, you actually ask, did this answer your question? So now you're using active participation on the front end and on the back end, and now I'm getting granular feedback on did my sales pitch work or not, right? So it's really, really powerful.
Do you want to talk about the other two examples?
Yeah, I want to talk about the second example as well. So this is an actual case study, and we were able to improve conversion rates on the client's bestseller by 30%. So the backstory is that this is a very technical product. It costs hundreds of dollars, $1,500. And the challenge was that there were some people that were buying this air purifier because of the technical details. And of course, the technical details matter. But then there were also grandmas that were buying an air purifier because they wanted better air quality at home. And they didn't want to have to go through a huge wall of text of technical data, which is intimidating. It's not only do you go through a lot of content, but we're talking about HEPA filter, MERV rating, things that consumers might not understand. So what we did was we used active participation here. You'll notice the classic use case where we first have normal intro copy. We don't want to introduce a question right away. We pull the reader in, and then we just simply ask them in a very subtle way, how much time do you have today? And there are two options. I have 2 minutes and I have time. And our
Can you
calculation.
sorry, can you zoom in that part a little bit more? Yeah, perfect. Perfect.
So our calculation was that people who are just looking for the facts will probably want to click on I have 2 minutes, and people that actually want all the details, the diggers, will want to click on I have time. So we're using a time dimension over here to separate out these two users. But remember, the user is making that choice themselves. And then if people selected I have 2 minutes, we give them a very, very short, to the point, with all the important details covered, but elevator page. If people made the mistake of clicking on I have time, we showed them 5 pages worth of content because we knew they were Uber diggers. And we noticed, we tracked the overall conversion rate impact, and it went up by 30%. So that's another use case for active participation. I can jump to my third example.
Actually, before doing that, here's what I'm thinking about, an iteration of this concept, because obviously we have to play the ping pong game. Imagine if I'm seeing this message and I do have 2 minutes, but I also want to learn so much about it, right?
Great. I already know where you're going.
I can't right now. I just can't, because maybe I'm in line at the DMV, or I just don't have more than 2 minutes, right? Can we show another option of, maybe like collecting an email address, or
what we could do is, when you click on I have 2 minutes at the bottom of that sales page, we can say there's so much more we need to tell you. Give us your email and I'll send you an email. And this is the other thing I should mention here, is that we will not talk about this, but this choice of I have 2 minutes, I have time, this is very intentional. There's a lot of iterations we went through before we came up with this copy language. So I want the readers to be, or listeners or viewers to be aware of the fact that we're not literally saying copy paste 2 minutes and I have time on your website. Be context aware and apply it appropriately. But I'm going to share with you my favorite example. My favorite use case, the classic example.
Can you zoom? Sorry, we should interrupt. Can you zoom in a little bit more in the third example? Just to make
third example. Yeah.
The third. Yeah. Just, yep. Perfect. Yep.
Perfect. So this is my favorite example for active participation, and it is based on a classic. And Lorenzo is correct. If old school copywriters had a way to kind of use this technique, they would have been super happy, because one of the things that copywriters work with is this concept of awareness level. And you have to personalize the copy based on the user's awareness level. If I'm buying a SaaS software and I'm a power user, I'm totally different mindset versus someone who's never bought that software before and is a startup, and things like that. And it's very difficult to write copy that appeals to the power users and to the novices at the same time. And so what we did in this example is we were using active participation to personalize based on the awareness level of the buyer. So again, we do classic technique. We start off again, all of this copy, by the way, is my copy template. I use the same template for every client. So this wasn't going to be easy, pull the people in. But at this point, you don't even know there's any active participation. This is when you kind of get exposed to it. So we've already pulled you in to the slippery slide effect. And now we're asking, pick an option that best fits you. So we've categorized here to 3 user buckets. And this again goes back to something Lorenzo talks about a lot, about prioritizing. You cannot use active participation and say, okay, here are 15 options. Don't segment so much where it becomes meaningless. Like really, really prioritize on the most important use cases. And I would argue that maybe even 3 is too much. And maybe these are not the right 3 use cases. And that's things that you have to kind of think about. But we thought about like the fact that someone is new to juicing, that is a very specific sales pitch. And the way you have to really ask yourself is, would the way in which I sell my product change for these use cases dramatically? So if someone is new to juicing, that's a very different animal versus someone who's been doing juicing for many years. Another scenario could be that someone is familiar with juicing, but has just never bought our brand before. See, when you're buying a new brand for the first time, in this case, we are calling this Nash's Juicer. If your obstacle is not what the product does, your obstacle is like, what the fuck makes Nash credible for me to listen to Nash? And so I would have to personalize the sales pitch for that. And then this is a juicing nerd. This is like someone who is, you cannot, talk to them like they're a child. They know all the details, but they are new to the brand. So these were the 3 buckets that we kind of focused in on. And so that's my third example.
Yeah, super clever. And by the way, guys, Rishi, this is just 3 ideas, but as I said at the beginning, active participation has so many different use cases. There's actually a link in notes to the article that Rishi wrote about the whole concept of participation with 3 more examples. And again, I don't want you guys to say, okay, I'm gonna copy and paste what Rishi has done with his 6 examples, because it's just examples for different businesses. But check out that article in the notes, because you see, a few other ways of how you can leverage active participation to increase sales. Fantastic. So you showed three ideas here, 3 different examples. But which one do you think people should start with? Which one of the 3 people should start with?
I think awareness level. So for me, when I think, if I'm thinking about all kinds of segmentations, the most important segment for me always is someone who is new to my brand or new to the category. So those are the 2 that I would really focus in on, because my sales pitch changes quite a bit for someone who's new to the category. And I would say if I had to pick between those 2, again, go back to prioritization, I would focus on people who are absolutely new to my brand, and I would like really personalize for them. So yeah, so I would zero in on, I would apply the juicer awareness level technique.
Let's stick with this example, because I obviously I'm a customer research nerd, and I'm a sucker for qualitative data and understanding more about the customers. When I looked at this example, I'm like, oh my God, this is like, very smart. How do you think like active participation can be combined with customer research?
I don't know. I know that that's a
What do you
topic
mean you
that
don't know?
because I've never used it for collecting data, right? So, but I'd love to know your thoughts on how you would apply this to research.
All right. So, here's a couple of ideas around this example, right? I remember when I saw that example, this example, my first question I had when I saw those 3 options, my first question was, well, why 3 options? Why those 3 options? How has he come up with those 3 options? So what I would do here is I would first figure out what the different options are. Maybe I have bought 10 other juicers in the past. None of those juicers have worked for me. I need a different pitch, because now, I actually posted about this concept on LinkedIn today. If I have tried 10 different juicers in the past, none of the juicers have worked well for me. Now the level of skepticism that I have compared to even like people that have tried 9 other, it doesn't even have to be like people that have tried other, like 1 or never tried a juicer before. Now it's much higher, right? My skepticism level is much higher, and the sales pitch should be completely different. So what I would do is, okay, what kind of people are visiting my product page? Who are they? What kind of like product expertise they have about juicing? So I would come up with those different kind of like scenarios based on my research. That's one thing. The other example would be like, okay, fantastic. This is like the front end data. You tell me who you are, right? You Rishi tell me who you are as a user, and I machine high computer and website, I'll tailor the pitch based on who you are. But then what happens is, what if we actually tie in the on-site data that you have selected with the CRM data, so post-purchase data. So maybe everybody that, I'm just giving an example, it doesn't have to be like this, but maybe everybody that is new to juicing, for example, actually juicing could be a better example, but maybe let's talk about, for example, like a dog food, right? Maybe somebody that has never purchased dog food in their lives because they just got a dog as a Christmas gift, for example. maybe what happens is in the CRM data, you see that for that cohort of people, that nobody repurchases it, right? Or maybe that cohort of people repurchases more because they have less experience with other dog food, right? So now tie in front end data with CRM data could be super powerful.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really, really good point.
Cool. Now let's talk about the future. Let's talk about like in 10 years, right? 10 years from now. Let's pretend that active participation is mainstream. You know, a crazy amount of e-com businesses will be using it. What does active participation in 2033 look like compared to 2022?
Yeah, I mean,
11.
we're bad at, I mean, I can talk about like this one use, and I don't even think it's something that would require 10 years, but it's something that is a little complicated to do. But I think it's personally something I'm very interested in doing with active participation. I'll show you the example again. So we talked about this scenario where you are you come to the page and you are kind of like making these selections. Now, one thing that we know, and Lorenzo, I don't know if you have data on this, but I have empirical data on this, is that video always is more persuasive than copy. The problem with
Done
video,
right. If done right, if the salesperson that created the script of the video is a good copywriter.
that is true. This is true. This is true. That's why you have to nail the copy first, then you have to make the video. But there's no doubt that there is something deeply effective about video. But let's think about active participation and video pitches. So what would happen if I on the back end recorded micro video clips for, so one actor recorded micro video clips for all of these different scenarios. And when you clicked on play, I actually, it's like a custom made commercial. And where I'm now, by the way, I know that there are some websites that actually do this, where where you have a little chat prompt and there's a video sales page. So the technology kind of already exists, but this to me would be very, very interesting future use case for active participation, where you are essentially making a video presentation and it's stitched together in the backend, so the user doesn't even notice any transition. Maybe between each section you'll have a little screen where you're kind of saying this is the topic we'll cover, and then the next video starts, and so they don't see the jumps. But I think that would be very powerful.
Yeah, so if active participation would get any copyright, any old school direct response, and I think also like nowadays copywriters super excited about it. I think what you're talking about, the 2033 2032 version of active participation using video would get every single infomercial expert super excited about it, right? Because if active participation now is one-to-one selling using visual and words, in 10 years, which by the way, Rishi, I think that the client that really believes, or the company that really sees the value of what you're doing in this, I think should totally do the video thing even in 2022 and not wait 10 years, because it would be a waste of time. So infomercials is right now is one too many, right? Because I'm selling a product on QVC, and I'm a person and I'm selling to multiple people, like millions of people. What Rishi is talking about is, and I'm not talking about infomercials as like this lazy kind of like selling that is quite common in infomercial. I'm talking about like selling one-to-one with video, with product demonstration, based on what the user has told us that cares about.
Exactly right. Exactly right. That is it. We've covered everything there is to cover about active participation. We will include the link to the article in the bottom of the video. Any other questions for me, or have we wrapped it up?
I'm just like completely blown away again every time you and I have spoken about these concepts like crazy amount of times. There's a very good interview with Kurt Hasner on his podcast, where I also think he was blown away when you first spoke to him about it. So yeah, like I would love for everybody to actually comment below and just let us know what you think about this approach. Again, I've never seen anybody doing something like this, and I truly believe that this is gonna change a lot of things about how companies should do e-commerce in the future, in the
Thanks for
present as
having
well.
me today, man. I appreciate it.
Ciao, Rishi. Thank you.
Ciao. Ciao.